Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Part 233 based on novel. So let's start. Dien flickered around the sky as he used his mastery over spatial power to avoid the attacks of these linked offensive soul tools. At the same time, he lifted the dark dragon sword in his hand. These despicable humans! How dare they try to attack me? They shall pay the price for their audacity. At this instant, a deafening howl suddenly echoed in the sky. A dark red light flickered in the air. When the dark red light vanished, the sky suddenly turned red. It now resembled an ocean of blood as red clouds surged in the sky. Dien immediately tried to step into the space before him which he had opened up. However, he was shocked to discover that the space around him had been sealed. He was actually unable to break this spatial barrier to freely flicker around. It was during this short moment when the linked offensive soul tool started to sweep towards him again. Dien was ultimately Dien. Even though he was shocked, he was able to react in time. He swept the dark dragon sword in his hand horizontally as he ripped the space next to him apart. This was enough to absorb more than 2/3 of the linked offensive soul tools, while the remaining third landed on his body. The black sun and purple moon suddenly appeared behind him again as Dien's body paused in mid-air. After some of the linked offensive soul tools swept past his body, the aura his body was radiating instantly became overwhelmingly intense as his eyes lit up with a golden glow. It was apparent that the beast god had been enraged. However, at this instant, a flash of dark red suddenly appeared before him without any warning as it pierced right into his chest. It was a devilish-looking, long, and blood-red spear. It was so frighteningly red that it seemed as though fresh blood was about to drip from its tip. What was most scary about it was how Dien was suddenly surrounded by a sea of blood which immobilized him before the spear appeared. There was no way he could have evaded the spear's attack. This must be the thing that sealed the space around me. Dien immediately understood that at the first instant. However, this red spear had simply caught him off guard. At the same time, Dien was busy trying to deal with the attacks from the linked offensive soul tools. Under such circumstances, the long red spear was able to pierce into his chest. Dien's body was tougher than any known rare metal. Hence, after he was pierced, Dien released a loud cry as he swept his dark dragon sword horizontally before him. A painful grinding sound could be heard as the red spear was sliced in half. However, the tip of the spear suddenly drilled itself into Dien's body. Countless vengeful howls could be heard echoing about in the sky. The blood sea was also fervently trying to consume Dien. At this moment, the linked offensive soul tools had finally stopped their attacks. Such powerful attacks were often incapable of being executed in a sustained fashion. Otherwise, the soul tools would overheat and end up being damaged. However, they had already played their part. The red spear was the real weapon that could actually harm the beast god. Dien's body was trembling in the air as he furiously slashed his dark dragon sword downwards in the direction of the Sun Moon Empire military camp. The blood sea was forcefully ripped apart as a dragon's roar echoed in the sky. The linked defensive protective barrier of a soul deployment area within the Sun Moon Empire military camp immediately cracked. A streak of purple-black sword light flashed and headed for one of the tents. A flash of blood-colored light emerged from the tent instantly as it countered the sword light which was coming down on it. 4 of the 12 evil soul masters who were sitting with their legs crossed in the tent spat out a mouthful of blood at the same instant. Zhongli Wu's face also turned pale. Dien's howl could be heard from 50 kilometers away. He raised the dark dragon sword in his hand before slashing it at the blood sea. Another crack formed in the sky, and he crept into it despite knowing how the space around him had been sealed. Nonetheless, he disappeared into the crack. The blood sea continued to ripple furiously as it circulated in the air in search of Dien. However, it eventually disintegrated after failing to locate its target. A dissatisfied look formed on Zhongli Wu's face. How could he have fled like this? Nonetheless, he has been pierced by the red spear, and must now be seriously injured. Follow me into the Great Star Doe Forest. As he spoke, he quickly rose from where he was as he led a group of evil soul masters to chase Dien into the Great Star Doe Forest. With their group's ability, even if all 12 of them were to link up together, it was still unlikely that they could harm Dien. However, they had not only used their own powers for the blow earlier. They had borrowed the vengeance from tens of thousands of avenging spirits. Zhongli Wu had burned these spirits into the red spear that had pierced Dien. It was able to seal all the space around him in that instant and deal a heavy blow to him. Even though the spear was unable to penetrate Dien's body fully, part of it had successfully pierced through his body and released the frightening vengeance into him. The frightening vengeance would wreak havoc within his body until he was fully consumed by it. This was why Zhongli Wu was so eager to hunt him down. If they were really able to take Dien down, the Holy Ghost Church would truly become unstoppable. He would then take over Dien as the strongest individual in the world. After witnessing this scene, Yuhao, Elder Xian, and the rest were able to finally heave a sigh of relief. The beast god was finally gone. He would probably not threaten Yuhao for the time being. It was only after Yuhao lifted his icy war god's armor's visor that Elder Xian saw how pale his face was. What? Yuhao spat out a mouthful of blood as his body started to sway left and right. He was only able to not fall with the help of Elder Xian. Let's talk after we have returned. Elder Xian supported Yuhao with his arm as he mustered his soul power and brought both of them back to Shrek City. Yang Shaoxia and the others followed behind them. The battle which had just occurred had so many close shaves. At the same time, it had allowed them to witness the Sun Moon Empire's frightening capabilities. Even Dien could not gain the upper hand over the linked offensive soul tools with the power he possessed. On top of that, the Sun Moon Empire had the backing of the Holy Ghost Church. The Holy Ghost Church was even able to hurt the beast god, and force him to retreat. The people from Shrek Academy had not even found the time to celebrate Yuhao's success before they were once again overwhelmed by that demoralizing revelation. Elder Xian brought Yuhao back to the Sea God's pavilion directly. When they came before the golden tree, Yuhao knelt before it and prayed to it just as before. Teacher, thank you for lending me a hand. I have finally made a breakthrough, and completed my second soul core. You can rest assured that I will definitely do my best to defend Shrek City, and stop the Sun Moon Empire from destroying our academy. Elder Xian, who was standing beside Yuhao, turned around and hid his face from him. He naturally knew that Elder Mu would not be able to hear Yuhao's voice again. However, how could he bear to tell him the truth? After paying his respects to the golden tree, Yuhao stood up and returned to the Sea God's pavilion with Elder Xian. How are you? Elder Xian asked. Even though both of them had 2 soul cores, Yuhao's cultivation method was entirely different from his. Even Elder Xian was unable to use his soul power to see the condition of his body. Yuhao said, I'm fine. My body is just a little shaken after taking the beast god's blow. However, my body's regenerative ability seems to have become a lot more powerful than it was previously. I should be fine in no time. Elder Xian nodded and said, that's great. Anyways, congratulations. You now finally own your second soul core. And it's a second soul core formed from the yin-yang complement technique. I believe that you should be able to surpass me in no time, and become the #1 soul master in our academy. In fact, you might even possess the ability to challenge the beast god. Dien must have come to look for trouble after sensing that you were about to make your breakthrough. Fortunately, we managed to tide over his attacks. In fact, I believe that Dien might also be in a sticky situation right now. Just now, I saw a group of evil soul masters heading in the direction of the Great Star Doe Forest. Dien must have sustained serious injuries, and now they are going to hunt him down. A sly smile formed on Yuhao's face as he said, those evil soul masters have no idea what they are getting into. They must be mad to even think about hunting the beast god. Elder Xian nodded in agreement. The Great Star Doe Forest does not only have Dien. It also houses the Emerald Swan, the Bear Lord, the Myriad Demon King, and many other powerful soul beasts. Those evil soul masters might not be able to get the better of them. Yuhao shook his head and said, I don't think Emerald Swan and the rest can actually hold up against those evil soul masters. The collective strength and power they are able to draw from is immense. They must have absorbed the souls of the soldiers which were killed by the spillovers released by my battle with Dien. That's why they were able to harm Dien. With the power that they now wield, they would be equivalent to a few transcendent Olor. However, they have probably overestimated the extent of the injuries the beast god has sustained. Oh! Elder Xian was surprised by Yuhao's words. Is it not serious enough? I thought the attack was already pretty powerful. Yuhao replied, yes, it was very powerful. It contained the vengeance of tens of thousands of avenging spirits, and possessed immense destructive power. However, it is also important to note that Dien also possesses yin-yang equilibrium soul cores. With these soul cores, it will be extremely difficult for him to sustain heavy injuries. Quick, tell me what's so special about your yin-yang equilibrium soul cores, Elder Xian asked curiously. Yuhao explained, after the yin-yang equilibrium soul cores are formed, the power of the two soul cores will fuse with one another. If I were to phrase it another way, the powers would be reorganized, purified and compressed after colliding against one another. This allows my soul power to possess spiritual power and ultimate ice characteristics. At the same time, the brand new soul power will also take the form of a whirlpool. This whirlpool-shaped soul power was definitely the product of the fusion between my soul power and spiritual power. It possesses extremely destructive capabilities. At the same time, it is also able to compress my soul power to the most compact state possible. I can sense how the total volume of my soul power had increased to 3 times its original amount after I made my breakthrough. In addition, my fighting power has increased to 5 times what it was before my soul power compression. The brand new soul power produced by the yin-yang complement technique is extremely resistant to any external energy or power. Even though the vengeance from the spear was extremely intense, I believe Dien's yin-yang equilibrium soul power, which he must have cultivated for many years, will definitely be able to dissolve the vengeance. Besides, his body is dark type. Even though he should definitely be injured, his injuries should not be as serious as the evil soul masters have imagined. Those evil soul masters are really unwise to intrude into the Great Star Do Forest and challenge the beast god on his home ground. After hearing Yuhao's explanation, Elder Xian exhaled deeply. It seems like it's really not easy for any soul master to fight the beast god, especially with the power he possesses. Even though the status of soul engineers had been on the rise, in fact, they seemed to be overtaking soul masters in terms of prestige, as soul tools continued to become more advanced. The most powerful individuals still remained at the top of the pyramid. For example, the beast god was definitely able to flee no matter how many soul engineers were sent after him. No one would be able to hold him down. And if he were to go all out and attack, he would definitely be more frightening than any soul engineer legion. As he thought about soul engineer legions, Yuhao suddenly recalled the short interaction he had with the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineer Legion. It was truly a force not to be meddled with. If they were to clash head-on with the beast god, who knew if they could actually slay him? Yuhao knew that he would eventually have to face the world's most powerful Soul Engineer Legion in the future when they clashed head-on with the Sun Moon Empire. Elder Xian said, Yuhao, you've said enough. Go and treat your injuries. I will keep watch over you. You should consolidate your powers now that you've made your breakthrough. It would have been great if Wutong was around. Who knows? Both of you might just be able to stand up to Dien if both of you were to link up together. Yuhao revealed an awkward smile as he shook his head. I am afraid there might now be a problem with my martial soul fusion with Wutong after my breakthrough. My soul power has fundamentally changed, and might not be able to fuse with her soul power anymore. However, I think our martial soul fusion skills should still be usable. If she is around, I think both of us should be able to defend ourselves. Where did this little brat run off to? Why is Wutong not with you at such an important time? Elder Xian asked. Yuhao replied, Elder Xian, I shan't hide it from you. I have gotten her to go to the Do Ling Empire and persuade the people there not to send their troops over to Shrek City. Elder Xian did not seem to be surprised by what Yuhao had revealed. Instead, he sighed and said, "Yuhao, do you know what will happen if everyone were to know what you have done?" Yuhao lowered his head and said, "It's really obvious that this is a trap. I really don't want them to fall into this trap. At the same time, I know my actions will not be able to change the outcome. The Douling Empire and Star Luo Empire will not be able to pass up this chance to cooperate with us and defeat the Sun Moon Empire. However, if they were to really come and assist us, I'm afraid." Elder Xian sighed and said, "Even though Wutong was fairly emotional the other day, I could tell that what she had suggested was very likely true. However, you must understand that no matter how likely her proposition was, the Academy can never take such risks. This is because we simply cannot afford to fail. Hence, when such moments arrive, we have no choice but to prioritize the survival of our Academy. Even though we were able to inflict some damage on the Sun Moon Empire thanks to your efforts, at the same time, we caught a glimpse of how powerful their army has become. Even Dien had no choice but to avoid a direct blow from some of their attacks. Needless to say, we would probably not be able to withstand their blows either. If we were really to clash head-on, what do you think our odds of beating them are?" Yuhao nodded. "I understand your dilemma. Hence, I can only do what I can to improve the situation." Following which, I went into my closed-door cultivation and attempted to make my breakthrough in the hopes of threatening the Sun Moon Empire with my new abilities. "Elder Xian, once I have recovered, I hope to pay a visit to the Sun Moon Empire's military camp." Elder Xian's eyes widened slightly before he replied, "Sure, go ahead. In fact, this is a good time to do that." He did not bother asking what Yuhao planned to do at the camp. After hearing what Wutong had said previously, he could roughly guess that Yuhao and the War God Empress had a peculiar relationship going on. Now that the evil soul masters had headed to the Great Star Do Forest, it was a good chance for him to find her. Elder Xian personally sent Yuhao to his room in the Sea God's Pavilion before ordering his people to head to the Tang sect and inform the people there that Yuhao was well. After crossing his legs and sitting up straight, Yuhao's mind returned to its tranquil state. Following which, he began to recount the collision he had had with Dien. That blow from Dien must have been close to his full power. Even though his dark-type power was not particularly frightening, it became invincible once it was combined with his spatial power. The yin-yang equilibrium soul cores in his body started to rotate as small whirlpools of soul power started to circulate within his passageways, releasing a mystical sensation. Even though Yuhao had sustained some concussive injuries, they were not particularly serious because of his icy war god's armor. In addition, he had fully absorbed the energy from the dragon pill. This gave his body strength and resistance which was beyond that of any human. The soul power which was infused with his spiritual power and ultimate ice circulated along the path dictated by the mysterious heaven technique under his control. After a few circulations, the injuries in his body vanished. Even though it was unbelievably tough to use the yin-yang complement technique to cultivate one's second soul core, it promised many incredible benefits after it was completed. Even Yuhao was unable to accurately measure how much soul power he could control now. However, he was certain that he should be able to take on powerful cultivators like Yang Xiaosha one-on-one even if he didn't have Tang Wutong with him. Having a second soul core formed from the yin-yang complement technique granted him regenerative ability that was far beyond that of a titled Dolor or transcendent Dolor, who both only had one soul core. He had a massive advantage over them when it came to his soul power's strength and flexibility, as well as the duality of his soul power. Dien's soul power also possessed dual characteristics. However, his duality was a fusion of his dark-type power and spatial power. It was important to note that the spatial power did not belong to him. Instead, he had spent hundreds of thousands of years accumulating and experimenting to gain an understanding of the spatial power which surrounded him. Following which, he integrated this understanding of spatial power into his own dark-type power and used his spatial power to replace his relatively weak spiritual power. Hence, Dien's soul power actually contained 3 different kinds of power. However, his spiritual power was relatively weaker than the others. Yuhao knew that he still had a long way to go. Acquiring his second soul core was equivalent to opening a new door of possibilities. There was plenty for him to explore and look forward to. While he had started to get the hang of how to use his icy war god's armor, he had only come into contact with the tip of the iceberg when it came to the capabilities of his Morning Dew dagger. After all, the Morning Dew dagger was an actual godly weapon. Today, the Morning Dew dagger had already helped him negate a large part of the power from Dien's slash, which had transcended space. Otherwise, he would definitely have sustained heavier injuries. However, Yuhao believed that his life would not be at any risk. He could sense that Dien did not want to kill him. Of course, he would not feel grateful towards the beast god because of this. He was very clear why Dien did not want to kill him. As nightfall came, Yuhao gently stretched as he floated from his bed to the ground. As he stretched, his entire body radiated a powerful aura. It was as though he were a gigantic dragon. After completing the cultivation of his second soul core, Yuhao had officially stepped into the league of the most powerful cultivators. Even though Shrek Academy had plenty of powerful cultivators, he was definitely qualified to call himself one of them now. Yuhao took in a deep breath, and allowed the air to circulate within his body before exhaling. The air that escaped from his mouth seemed as though it had left his body in a spiral manner. Even though there was no soul power in his breath, Yuhao felt as though everything around him was in his control. After his fight with Dien and the cultivation he had just completed, he had now developed a basic understanding of his body's current situation. As of now, Yuhao's soul power should be somewhere around rank 92. His actual soul power volume was closer to that of a rank 96 transcendent allure. However, his soul power possessed dual characteristics and had been formed through yin-yang equilibrium. At the same time, his soul power possessed rapid regenerative ability, and was a lot more flexible than normal soul power. Coupled with his twin martial souls, he would not even be at a disadvantage if he were to fight with a rank 97 transcendent allure based solely on soul power. If he were to bump into powerful cultivators like Long Xiaoyao again, he still might not be able to defeat them, but he would not be powerless like before. He was able to melt into the night sky by developing that intent. There was no need for him to deliberately execute a soul skill. This was obviously an ability that belonged to a transcendent allure. After becoming a transcendent allure, one's soul skills would fuse perfectly with one's body. The soul skill would naturally be executed according to one's intent. There was no need to deliberately release one's martial soul or activate one's soul rings. The speed of the execution would hence be faster as the power of the effect became enhanced. As he floated out of the sea god's pavilion, Yuhao soared high up into the sky before vanishing out of sight. Elder Xian, who had been meditating in his own room, opened his eyes as he revealed a warm smile. Elder Mu, I have found you a successor. The azure sky was very clear. Perhaps it was because the battle earlier in the day had blown away all the clouds and mist. The night view was spectacular. Countless stars decorated the sky. They were like sparkling diamonds sewn on a dark blue piece of silk. The view was particularly moving. Because of the radiant moon, the night did not seem as dark and depressing as it would have been. The moon allowed Yuhao to look far ahead. While he was flying through the sky, the sensations which were attacking his senses were completely different from before. After acquiring his second soul core, everything seemed to have changed. His cultivation level, senses, spiritual power, and even his understanding of the world had become different. If his understanding of the world was formerly but the tip of the iceberg, he was now capable of appreciating everything, and drawing out the universal laws that governed the patterns around him. He felt as if he could be in control of anything and everything around him, no matter what circumstances he found himself in. This sensation was particularly special and pleasant. Even Yuhao was unable to explain why it felt this special. He merely felt that even the smallest particles in the air could transform under his control and according to his intent. And the original three-dimensional world that Yuhao was familiar with now seemed to have disintegrated into isolated segments. After acquiring his second soul core, he seemed to have understood some ideas about the spaces and the gaps between dimensions. Even though he was far from reaching Dien's level, he believed he would be able to eventually attain a deep understanding of spatial power if he were to continue developing his understanding of this state. He no longer seemed to require any soul power to fly. It was as if the air had become a part of his body. With simple intent, the air would propel his body forward. Controlling the speed of his motion was also controllable by his intent. It turned out that he no longer needed a flying-type soul tool after gaining his second soul core. As for his speed limit, Yuhao gave that an attempt too. He was definitely faster than supersonic speed. Once he reached a certain speed, he felt that he was able to break through space. It was only now that he realized that the beast god's ability to transcend space wasn't very special. It was achievable once his speed reached a certain extreme, and once he was able to understand the mysteries of space. He couldn't do so now, but he would find a way to do it in the future. The formation of his second soul core opened a new door for him. The existence of this door also gave him the opportunity to work towards the peak of this world. He soon covered 50 kilometers just as he was silently comprehending everything. Yuhao let all types of soul tools scan his body, but he wasn't afraid of being discovered. This was because he was like a part of the air right now. Even the beast god couldn't do this, as he didn't have imitation. After forming his second soul core, Yuhao's imitation had also reached a peak. It was no longer just simply imitating. It was more like a transformation. He could transform into anything he wanted to, including air. The destruction caused in the day could still be seen. Watching from the sky, it was clear that one entire region was completely empty. Even from the sky, Yuhao could still sense the aura of darkness and ultimate ice coming from that section. This plot of land would take a long time to neutralize these forces. Before they were neutralized, no living matter could survive here. Even any living organism above it was affected. Yuhao's spiritual detection was unleashed like a huge web. The entire Sun-Moon Empire camp was covered. Very soon, Yuhao found who he wanted. He drifted down and landed in the base. Juzi was distracted in her seat at this moment. There was an uncertain look in her eyes. One couldn't blame her for feeling this way. She was still very confused. In the day, she had watched as Dien stuck Yuhao with a sword. That was also a very key reason why she was determined to attack the beast god. Everything that had happened afterward was under her control. The only thing she was unsure about was how Yuhao was. He actually clashed against the beast god. Although he was much stronger than he was before, would the beast god's attack have left him with serious injuries? "Can I enter?" A clear voice sounded from outside, which caused Juzi to lift her head. "Who is it?" After she asked, she subconsciously covered her mouth. This was because she realized that the voice didn't come from outside the tent, but was ringing inside her head. Whoosh whoosh. A few figures quickly dashed into the tent. "Marshal, what's going on?" The people who entered were all dressed in fiery red human-shaped soul tools. They were members of the Fire Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion. Among the 5 Soul Engineer Legions in the hand that protects the nation, only Juzi's 30 bodyguards, the team and vice-team leaders of the respective Soul Engineer Legions, and the entire Sun-Moon Imperial Soul Engineer Legion were equipped with human-shaped soul tools. These guards that were standing guard outside Juzi's tent were all elites among the elites in the Fire Phoenix Soul Engineer Legion. Juzi waved her hand and said, "Nothing. I might have heard wrongly earlier. All of you can leave now." "Yes." While the guards were a little perplexed, they still retreated after performing a simple check of the tent. Juzi returned to her seat and sat down. She gently pressed her right hand to her chair handle. Around the tent, a spiritual barrier silently went off. In that short period of time earlier, she had already known whose voice that was. "Is he here? Is he really here? Juzi?" The voice sounded once again. Juzi was stunned. She subconsciously covered her mouth. This was because she was astonished to discover that Yuhao had appeared in front of her without any warning. Juzi was in a daze. Before she could even open her mouth, Yuhao had already pulled her over with one hand. At this instant, countless images surfaced in Juzi's head. She subconsciously wanted to grab the handle on the other side. However, she stopped after her hand moved slightly. Yuhao wasn't restraining her. Instead, she stopped of her own accord. A sorrowful feeling surged in her heart. Is he finally going to make a move on me? Has he made up his mind? Juzi mocked herself and shut her eyes. She had many tricks up her sleeve to deal with Yuhao. The tent was full of traps. If she used the installations in the tent to stop Yuhao for even a moment, she was confident that someone would come to save her. However, she didn't do so. Rather, she didn't do anything. At this instant, she even felt as if the shackles on her had been removed. Dying under his hands was probably the best relief that she could get. Yuhao placed his hand on Juzi's shoulder. Following this, a pitch-black door appeared behind him. Lights flashed, and both he and Juzi vanished into that door. Juzi only felt that her soul had left her body. Everything around her distorted, but there was a weird force protecting her. Nothing in the outside world could touch her body. And then, everything returned to normal. Juzi's legs shook, and she found her footing again. Everything around her brightened up. The air was slightly cold and sinister. When Juzi opened her eyes, she discovered that she was on a little mountain with Yuhao. Not far from this mountain was a huge base. There were many soul engineers training there. The lighting here was also dimmer than usual, like it was night time. Juzi was shocked as she asked Yuhao, "Where are we?" Yuhao smiled and replied, "This is my place." "Your place?" Juzi was curious. She wasn't afraid of dying in Yuhao's arms. Right now, she wasn't fearful at all. Yuhao asked a little cheekily, "Do you really think I'll tell you the secret of this place?" Juzi shook her head and said, "Whatever. Why did you bring me here?" Yuhao laughed slightly, "For no reason. We are friends. I only invited you here as a guest. Can't I do that? Let's go and get a cup of tea." As he spoke, he proceeded in the direction of the base. Juzi stomped the ground. Although she didn't know what was going on, she still followed him. For some reason, she felt that she would be in grave danger if she left his side. Juzi wasn't wearing any armor right now, only a red dress. It seemed like she was a young but rich lady. "Marshal." The soldiers all came up to greet Yuhao when they saw him. They were all delightfully surprised to see him. Yuhao and the others from the Tang sect had been gone for some time without returning. Although there was food and water here, they were still very lonely. The three Soul Engineer legions were loving the war against the Sun Moon Empire. It was truly exciting. Furthermore, they were also very happy to plunder the Sun Moon Empire. It was also their first time seeing Juzi. When they saw her, they appeared very playful. Although Juzi wasn't as pretty as Tang Wutong, she had a very special aura about her. This left a deep impression on others, especially her delicate skin. These Soul Engineers unwittingly took another few glances at her. Yuhao brought Juzi to where he stayed in the base. Although Juzi kept on following him, she was still observing everything around her. Since she hadn't died, everything here was very important to her. Being observant had become a habit that she followed in her life. Yuhao didn't bother her, and didn't stop her either. After entering his room, someone delivered tea and some snacks. After this period of restructuring, this base was already very similar one onto the Doluo continent. "Please, enjoy some tea." Yuhao raised his own teacup and took a sip. Juzi didn't move, only silently sat and watched. Yuhao smiled as he asked, "Why are you looking at me? Tell me, where is this place?" "Yuhao, I didn't expect you to have such a big secret," Juzi said with a serious face. Yuhao smiled and replied, "Didn't I tell you earlier that this is my place?" Juzi's eyes suddenly brightened. "You can control spatial power?" After hearing her question, Yuhao was astonished. "Can you actually tell?" Juzi groaned, "While I might not be particularly strong, you must not forget that I'm the Sun Moon Empire's War God Empress. I'm always in touch with the most senior officials in the Sun Moon Empire, especially their top Soul Engineers. In terms of my experience, I'm not lacking compared to others. It's just that I don't believe you can control such a big plot of space, given your abilities. This isn't just ordinary spatial power anymore. Even Dien couldn't possibly create an entire plane that belongs to him. I understand everything now. The sneak attacks on the Sun Moon Empire were indeed committed by you. With such a plane and your flying speed, you can indeed appear in any corner of the Sun Moon Empire. No wonder you were so difficult to deal with. Even His Majesty was hurt by your attack. This video will end here.